Welcome to A Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. On today's episode, Charles Albanese. Before we get into this serial killer today, here is Jeff Scott Soto with a message.
This is Jeff Scott Soto, and you are watching and listening to the Chris Reason Network here on YouTube. Turn it up, keep it on, and rock on.
This is A Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. Charles Michael Albanese, born June 13th, 1937, died September 20th, 1995, was an American serial killer who poisoned three relatives with arsenic in McHenry, Illinois from 1980 to 1981. In order to attain their inheritance, bank funds, real estate, life insurance payouts, and pension proceeds. He was sentenced to death in two separate trials and ultimately executed in 1995. Charles Michael Albanese was born June 13, 1937, in Chicago, Illinois. He was the elder son of entrepreneur Michael Albanese Sr. and his wife Clara Nikolinsky. Little is known of his childhood, but acquaintances would recall that Albanese was a spoiled brat who always wanted to be a big shot, an ambitious young man who wanted to earn as much money doing as little work as possible. During the mid-1960s, he worked as a car salesman for Norwood Motors, Inc., based out of Morton Grove. His first known crime occurred on February 1st, 1965, when Albanese was an unidentified accomplice posing as detectives broke into the home of 61-year-old CTA bus driver Emmett Farrell and stole $160 from him. About a week later, using information provided by a neighbor who had written down his car license plate, Albanese was arrested and positively identified by the Farrells as one of the burglars. Not long after, he was indicted by a grand jury for armed robbery and several counts of auto theft, the latter under the alias Charles Romaine, for which he was convicted and sentenced to 5 years probation. Following his conviction, his wife divorced him after 6 years of marriage and moved away with their three daughters to live in Wisconsin. At some later point, he married his second wife, but little is known of their relationship. While still legally married to his second wife, Albanese went on to marry Virginia Mueller in Las Vegas in 1972 during the Labor Day weekend. The divorce with the latter woman was finalized the next year. His second ex-wife would file two more complaints against him in the following years, one in McHenry County for avoiding to pay $1,475 of child support in 1977, and another for non-support of a petition filed in Chicago in 1980. Despite his legal troubles, Albanese was seemingly happily married, and due to his position as a president at the Allied Die Casting Company, which is owned by his father, he earned an annual salary of $60,000, and in 1978, Albanese and his family moved to Spring Grove, where he earned a reputation amongst his neighbors as a man who liked to flaunt his wealth and influence. It was estimated that he owned several expensive cars, including a Cadillac, and it always took his wife and two daughters on annual vacations to either Morocco Island in Florida or Jamaica. In mid-1980, Charles began to pay frequent visits to the Leisure Village retirement community in Fox Lake, where his wife's mother, 69-year-old Marion Mueller, lived with her own mother, 89-year-old Mary Lambert. When doing so, he would often bring little gifts varying from jewelry and trinkets, and would often dine with them whenever he could. During these visits, he would gradually convince Lambert to transfer her financial assets to her daughter, completely bypassing her other daughter and son. Then, unbeknownst to anyone from his family, he contacted the operator of a metal plating company in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, to whom he sometimes sold scrap zinc, I cannot pronounce this, ostensibly to ask what would be the most efficient method to get rid of some pests in his home. On the man's recommendation, Albanese was supplied with arsenic and instructed how to use it, and over the next few months he administered small doses of the poison in Mueller's food. The first death came about on August 6, 1980, when Mueller began to suffer from diarrhea and violent vomiting, for which she was rushed to the McHenry Hospital, where she died on the same day. Her cause of death was listed as a heart attack. Only 12 days later, Lambert was taken by a similar illness and rushed to the St. Therese Hospital in Waukegan, where she died from what was deemed unnatural causes. The sudden death of the two women sparked fears in the locals, as well as rumors that the village's food and water supply had been contaminated. In response, the Lake County Health Department launched a full-scale investigation in both the sewage system and the restaurants, but all tests returned negative. Due to the lack of any suspicious substances or activity, the investigation was concluded and life slowly returned to normal. Owing to their deaths, Mueller and Lambert's estates, which amounted to around $150,000, were transferred to Albanese's wife, Virginia. Not long after the tragedy, Albanese attended a meeting with his father on September 4th, 1980, during which an argument broke out between the two, with Michael Sr. saying that he did not want him in the company anymore. A few days later, the elder Albanese changed his stance and simply demoted him to treasurer. In what appeared to be an act of gratitude, Albanese began bringing homemade cookies to his father at work, as well as snacks for his younger brother. Just 4 days after he began doing so, Michael Jr. had to be hospitalized due to severe vomiting and nausea. And in the following months, both Michael Sr. and Michael Jr. were hospitalized on several occasions due to violent illnesses, with the former succumbing to his ailments on May 16, 1981, at age 69. With the death of his father, Albanese inherited his $267,373 estate, as well as tighter control over the family business. As two of the three murders were in a different jurisdiction, it was decided that Albanese would be charged in two separate trials, one in Lake County for the murders of Lambert, his father, and the attempted murder of his brother, and another in McHenry County for the murder of Mueller. The first would be the Lake County trial, in which he pleaded innocent on all charges. Due to the pretrial publicity surrounding the case, the trial venue was moved to Bloomington and was scheduled for May 1982. After deliberation for just over 7 hours, the jury found Albanese guilty on all counts on May 18th. The prosecution saw a death sentence, saying that despite his lack of a serious criminal history, he deserved to die since he had shown no remorse. 2 days later, Albanese was sentenced to die in the electric chair. As the sentence was read out by the judge, he showed no emotion and appeared tired. That same October, Albanese was transferred to Lake County to stand trial on Lambert's murder, in spite of his claims that either his brother or a random killer was actually responsible for all the killings, as well as his attorney's unsuccessful motion to dismiss the charges due to circumstantial evidence. Albanese was convicted of Mueller's murder on October 26. Days later, he was again sentenced to death. Albanese also received a 6-year sentence for the attempted murder of his brother and 5 years for two theft counts. In the following years, Albanese attempted to have his sentence appealed and convictions overturned, but all of them were shot down. On September 20th, 1995, he was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center, continuing to protest his innocence and accusing the authorities of covering up the facts of the case. For his last meal, he requested prime rib, baked potato, garlic bread, coffee, Coca-Cola, and pistachio ice cream. Albanese made no final statement, but said thank you to the warden before he was put to death. Thank you guys for joining me on this shorter episode of A Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. Hit that follow button on all major podcast platforms to stay up to date for when new episodes air. Same thing with YouTube. Hit subscribe and select the notification bell and hit all so you know when we have new episodes air on there and videos of other content as well. Check out our online store at ebay.com/str/Chris Reason Network. Get awesome products from video games, comic books, action figures, and more. Peace and bacon grease, guys. This is A Reason to Talk.